6 years ago, thousands of Syrians took to the streets to protest for more equality in Syria. What started as a protest is now a war. Even today, on this sad anniversary, at least 25 people have been killed in a suicide bomb attack in Damascus. Amani Ibrahimi reports.
Who imagined a pro-democracy protest in the southern city of Dirar back in 2011 would turn from this to this? March 15 marks 6 years since the Syrian revolution turned its country into a cold-blooded war, a motherland torn apart by its own people.
I think that it's safe to say now that the regime has crossed a point of no return, and it's a matter of time and cost before it needs to change, before President Assad has to step down and create a serious transition away from the Ba'ath Party and away from his family's rule.
The battle between President Bashar al-Assad's forces and opposition rebels forced over 4 million people to flee from the towns that they had once grew up in. A further 6 million people are internally displaced within Syria. Children that once played on their streets now play in countryside areas. Near the tents they now call their home.
The situation here is really bad. Bashar al-Assad destroyed us and is forcing people to flee to the fields and become homeless.
Anti-government protests initially began after the arrest and torture of some teenagers who had painted revolutionary slogans on a school wall. Security forces reacted by opening fire on the protesters, resulting in several deaths that outrage even more demonstrators throughout the nation.
We don't like Bashar. We don't like regime. We want them, go out, but not by this way. Not by this way. Easier way. Kill everybody, destroy the country. For what? Just to change regime? It's too much.
As the amount of protests began to increase, so did the number of protesters, and by July 2011, the numbers had grown to thousands, turning the situation into a violent one. In spite of this, not everybody is against the government. Many are still in support of the president.
We want to express about our love to our minister, our President al-Assad, Bashar al-Assad. We all with him. And all the other channels which give us the other photo of not loving Assad is not true. All the Syrian people love Bashar al-Assad. The country's once united nation had divided itself, turning their motherland into a battlefield. As opposition rebels fought Assad's army to seize control over cities, towns and the countryside. It was not long before the conflict reached Damascus and Aleppo in 2012. Figures given by UN envoy stated that in 2016, the death toll had risen to 400,000 after it was reported to have been 90,000 3 years before that.
President Bashar al-Assad does not accept that there has been any bloodshed. I was there when he gave the orders. He said no bullets should be fired on civilians, even if security service personnel are killed.
The UN demanded all parties involved to end the use of weapons in populated areas in order to prevent civilian killings, but this hasn't happened. Despite the UN's attempts at peace talks, the fighting continued. However, Syria's president did agree to remove and destroy the nation's chemical weapons arsenal following the threat of US military intervention.
I'm not puppet. I wasn't made by the West to go to the West or to any other country. I'm Syrian. I'm made in Syria, and I have to live in Syria and die in Syria.
Children are amongst many casualties that have suffered as a result of this ongoing civil war.
I was in the kitchen. I didn't understand what was falling on my head. Rocks fell on my head and my sister was completely covered with rocks and dust.
Attempts to resolve the conflict were made as the UN Secretary Council called for the 2012 Geneva Communique, in which a plan was presented to stop the violence through a political settlement. Another one was held in 2014, but only lasted 2 rounds. The Syrian government has received support from Iran, who is believed to be providing financial aid for weapons, military advisors and oil transfers. Russia is reported to have launched an air campaign against the president's opponents.
the Qatariji neighborhood of Aleppo was bombed by Russian airplanes that destroyed tens of thousands, and dozens of people are stuck under rubble. Among them, some have died and some are wounded. Until now, the civil defense forces are moving bodies from the debris and the search is ongoing.
What once seemed like only protests for democracy with hopes that it would eventually be resolved, as seen in Libya, Tunisia and Egypt, has escalated into a 6-year-long fight, tearing the nation apart, with no clear end in sight.